Back to the party, everyone. But don't get too comfy. We'll be leaving in just a minute. If time was a string connecting all of your stories, that party would be the point where everything knots up. And that knot keeps growing and growing, getting more and more tangled, dragging the rest of your stories into it. When Justin and I finally broke that awful, painful stare, I wandered down the hall and back into the party. Staggered in, really. But not from the alcohol. From everything else. I grabbed for the piano in the living room, then the piano bench, and I sat. I wanted to leave, but where would I go? I couldn't go home. Not yet. And wherever I went, how would I get there? I was too weak to walk. At least, I thought I was too weak. But in truth, I was too weak to try. The only thing I knew for certain was that I wanted to get out of there and not think about anything or anyone anymore. Then, a hand touched my shoulder. A gentle squeeze. It was Jenny Kurtz. Jenny, this one's for you. Jenny asked if I needed a ride home, and I almost laughed. Was it so obvious? Did I look that terrible? So I looped my arm in hers, and she helped me up, which felt good, letting someone help me. We walked out the front door, through a crowd either passed out on the porch or smoking in the yard. The sidewalk was damp. My feet, numb and heavy, shuffled across the pavement. I listened to the sound of every pebble and leaf that I stepped on. I wanted to hear them all, to block out the music and the voices behind me. Jenny, you didn't say a thing. You didn't ask me any questions. And I was so grateful. Maybe you've had things happen or seen things at parties that you just couldn't discuss. Not right away, at least. Which is sort of fitting because I haven't discussed any of this until now. Well, no. I tried. I tried once, but he didn't want to hear it. So, Jenny, you led me to your car. And even though my thoughts were somewhere else, my eyes focused on nothing. I felt your touch. You held my arm with such tenderness as you lowered me into the passenger seat. You buckled me in, got in your seat, then we left. What happened next, I'm not entirely sure. I wasn't paying attention because, in your car, I felt secure. The air inside was warm and comforting. The wiper blades, on a slow speed, gently pulled me out of my thoughts and into the car. Into reality. The rain wasn't heavy, but it blurred the windshield just enough to keep everything dreamlike. And I needed that. It kept my world from becoming too real, too fast. And then it hit. There's nothing like an accident to bring the world crashing back. The front wheel on my side slammed into and jumped the curb. A wooden post smacked into your front bumper and snapped back like a toothpick. A stop sign fell backward in front of your headlights. It caught under your car and you screamed and slammed on the brakes. In the side mirror, I watched sparks fly onto the road as we slid to a stop. Okay, now I'm awake. We sat for a moment, staring through the windshield. No words, not a glance between us. The wipers smeared the rain from side to side, and my hands stayed gripped to my seatbelt, thankful we only hit a sign. Your door opened, and I watched you walk to the front of your car, then crouch between the headlights for a closer look. You ran a hand over the dent and let your head drop forward. I couldn't tell if you were pissed. Or were you crying? Maybe you were laughing at how horrible the night was turning out. The dent wasn't bad. I mean, it wasn't good, but you had to feel some relief. It could have been worse. It could have been much, much worse. For example, you could have hit something else. Something alive. Whatever your initial thoughts, you stood up with a blank expression. Just standing there, staring at the dent, shaking your head. Then you caught my eye, and I'm sure I saw a frown, even if it lasted only a split second. But that frown turned into a smile, followed by a shrug. And what were the first words you said when you got back in the car? Well, that sucks. Then you put your key in the ignition and I stopped you. I couldn't let you drive away. You shut your eyes and said, Hannah, I'm not drunk. Well, I didn't accuse you of being drunk, Jenny, but I was wondering why the hell you couldn't keep your car on the road. It's raining, you said. And yes, true, it was. Barely. I told you to park the car. You told me to be reasonable. We both lived close by, and you'd stick to the residential streets, as if that made it any better. Hannah, don't worry, you said. Then you laughed. Nobody obeys stop signs anyway. They just roll on through. So now, because there isn't one there, it's legal. See? People will thank me. Again, I told you to park the car. We'd get a ride home from someone at the party. I'd pick you up first thing in the morning and drive you to your car. But you tried again. Hannah, listen. Park it, I said. Please. And then you told me to get out. But I wouldn't. I tried reasoning with you. You were lucky it was only a sign. Imagine what could happen if I let you drive us all the way home. But again, get out. I sat for a long time with my eyes shut, listening to the rain and the wipers. Hannah, get out! So, finally, I did. I opened the car door and stepped out, but I didn't shut it. I looked back at you, and you stared through your windshield, through the wipers, gripping the wheel. I asked if I could use your phone. I saw it sitting there right below the stereo. Why, you asked. I'm not sure why I told you the truth. I should have lied. We need to at least tell someone about the sign, I said. You kept your eyes straight ahead. They'll trace it. They can trace phone calls, Hannah. Then you started up the car and told me to shut the door. I didn't. So you reversed the car, and I jumped back to keep the door from knocking me over. You didn't care that the metal sign was crushing, grating the underside of your car. When you cleared it, the sign lay at my feet, warped and streaked with silver scratches. You revved the engine, and I took the hint, stepping back onto the curb. Then you peeled away, causing the door to slam shut, picking up speed the further you got. And you got away. In fact, you got away with much more than knocking down a sign, Jenny. And once again, I could have stopped it. Somehow. There must have been something I could have said. At the very least, I could have taken your keys. Or, at the very, very least, I could have reached in and stolen your phone to call the police. Actually, that's the only thing that would have mattered. Because you found your way home in one piece, Jenny. But that wasn't the problem. The sign was knocked down, and that was the problem. B6 on your map. 2 blocks from the party, there's a stop sign. But on that night, for part of the night, there wasn't. And it was raining. And someone was trying to deliver his pizzas on time. And someone else, headed in the opposite direction, was turning. There was no stop sign on that corner. Not on that night. And one of them, one of the drivers, died. I never knew the guy in that car. He was a senior. And when I saw his picture in the newspaper, I didn't recognize him. Just one of many faces at school I never got to know. And never would. I didn't go to his funeral either. Yes, maybe I should have, but I didn't. I couldn't. And now I'm sure it's obvious why. But some of you were there at his funeral. For those of you who did go, let me describe what school was like on the day of his funeral. In a word, it was quiet. About a quarter of the school took the morning off. Mostly seniors, of course, but for those of us who did go to school, the teachers let us know that if we simply forgot to bring a note from home, they wouldn't mark us absent if we wanted to attend the funeral. Mr. Porter said funerals can be a part of the healing process, but I doubted that very much. Not for me. Because on that corner, there wasn't a stop sign that night. Someone had knocked it over. And someone else, yours truly, could have stopped it. On the day of the funeral, so those of you who attended wouldn't miss any work, the rest of us did nothing. In every class, the teachers gave us free time. Free to write, free to read, free to think. And what did I do? For the first time, I thought about my own funeral. More and more, in very general terms, I'd been thinking about my own death. Just the fact of dying. But on that day, with all of you at a funeral, I began thinking of my own. I could picture life, school, and everything else continuing on without me. But I could not picture my funeral. Not at all. Mostly because I couldn't imagine who would attend or what they would say. I have no idea what you think of me. It's now been a couple of weeks since the party. So far, Jenny, you've done a great job of hiding from me. I suppose that's understandable. You'd like to forget what we did, what happened with your car and the stop sign, the repercussions. But you never will. I, on the other hand, only have to think about it for one more day. If I had known 2 cars were going to crash on that corner, I would have run back to the party and called the cops immediately. But I never imagined that would happen. Never. So instead, I walked, but not back to the party. My mind was racing all over the place. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't walk straight. I turned corner after corner with no idea where I was going. Eventually, I made it to a gas station. C7 on your map. And I used a payphone to call the police. As it rang, I found myself hugging the receiver, part of me hoping that no one would answer. I wanted to wait. I wanted the phone to just keep ringing. I wanted life to stay right there, on pause. When someone finally did answer, I sucked in the tears that wet my lips and told them that on the corner of Tanglewood and South. But she cut me off. She told me to calm down. And that's when I realized how hard I had been crying, how much I was struggling to catch one good breath. She told me the cops had already been called and were on their way. I was shocked. I couldn't believe you actually called the police, Jenny. But I shouldn't have been shocked. Because, as it turns out, you didn't call them. At school the next day, when everyone replayed the events of what happened the previous night, that's when I found out who had called. And it wasn't to report a fallen sign. It was to report an accident. An accident caused by a fallen sign. An accident I was never aware of until then. But that night, after hanging up the phone, I wandered the streets some more. Because I had to stop crying. Before I went home, I needed to calm down. If my parents caught me sneaking back in with tears in my eyes, they'd ask way too many questions. Unanswerable questions. So I walked without thinking about which roads to take. And it felt good. The cold. The mist. That's what the rain had turned into by then. A light mist. And I walked for hours, imagining the mist growing thick and swallowing me whole. The thought of disappearing like that, so simply, made me so happy. But that, as you know, never happened.